Before we get started, I want to share something for my listeners who are navigating grad school or supporting others who are. Are you feeling stuck or overwhelmed in your grad school preparation process? Or maybe you're part of a campus program trying to guide students through it all with limited time, staff, and tools. Trust me, I've been there and I've got something for you. I offer interactive and culturally responsive grad admissions and sustainable productivity workshops designed specifically for first-gen, BIPOC, low-income, neurodivergent, and non-traditional students. These workshops go beyond the basics as I cover everything from personal statement writing and funding your degree to overcoming burnout and building systems that actually work for your life and circumstances. If you're a student, I invite you to tell your program directors or support staff about these workshops as they're tailored to fill the gaps most programs can't always cover. And if you're an advisor or program director listening in, I get it. I've been in your shoes as a former program director myself, and I collaborate with institutions of all sizes. I'm also committed to working with your budget to make sure your students get the support they deserve. You can learn more and view testimonials at gradschoolfemtoring.com/speaking or head to my Talkadot speaker profile to view my sample speaking videos and read what past campuses have said. Let's work to close the hidden curriculum gap together. Welcome to the award-winning Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on inclusive grad school stories and learn about personal development and productivity tips. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, a certified coach, consultant, and author, and I will be serving as your Femtor, providing you with insider knowledge to help you reach your personal and professional goals. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, we are celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Is Grad School For Me, the book that I co-authored with my dear friend and Femtor, Doctora Miroslava Chávez-García. We're going to talk about the impact, the lessons we've learned, and what's coming next for the book and for us. So yeah, let's get into the topic. Today we have my guest, who's a returning guest, my co-author, Doctora Miroslava. She is a professor of history at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She's also the faculty director of the UCSB McNair Scholars Program. And she is the author of Migrant Longing, States of Delinquency and Negotiating Conquest. And of course, she's here to talk about Is Grad School For Me, the book that we're celebrating today. Welcome back on the podcast, Miros.
Thank you so much for having me, Yvette. It's really wonderful, and I was looking forward to this all week.
Aw, yay. I always look forward to meeting with you. It's almost like sometimes I forget, we can get caught up in our own struggles, day-to-day stuff. And when I see you, I'm always just like excited to talk to you or to vent with you or to share any new news, insights, what's going on. So today, with relation to the book, I'm curious if there's anything you want to share about yourself. I know folks can go back to listen to episode 248. That's the episode you were on where you talked about the topic of writing and publishing academic articles. You're an experienced author. I know that a lot of folks have reached out to me to let me know that episode was especially helpful, including assistant and associate professors. So I appreciate you coming back. And I'm curious if there's anything you want to share with the audience about you, just to give them a refresher, or for folks who are new to you and your work, if there's anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah, no, well, it's wonderful to hear that people have found that session or interview, however you want to call it, that I provided. I really love talking about writing and all of the nuts and bolts and learning about how to do it more effectively, creatively. I've been attending a couple of workshops on our campus recently. One was about how to turn your dissertation into a book and how to get rid of the dissertation ease, the kind of things that are unique to dissertations, and how we need to leave those behind, or learn to identify them and then figure out how to make this more of a book. So looking at the differences, and I wanted to go to help my students, but selfishly as well as for myself. And it just gives me motivated when I hear these, tips and tricks about how to do that. And so writing is always an evolving practice for myself. And I think most writers would say that. And I just enjoy doing it. And I was realizing it as I've been helping some colleagues, like I really enjoy this part very much of my work. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, and you can sense that. I mean, that's one of the things when we do our own talks, we talk about like the mission behind our work and what we really love about our work. And you're someone that I see as like you really dedicated and committed and find a lot of purpose and joy in the research and the writing process, which is inspiring. I wish that I felt the same way. But
Although I should say I am struggling with my academic. I have another big project. Well, project I've been working on for several years, and I've been doing let me read one more article before I get started, because I'm not sure what I want to say. And because it does say consistency, at least, when you have any topic, I'm not going to say it's just academic, but you have to be consistent every day, because you lose your spot, your train of thought.
Mhm.
And so then you have to kind of redo what, versus when you're already in it, you just kind of go back to where you left off. And so every time I have to stop and do work on another project, it's hard to jump back into it. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
And it's comforting. I mean, it's comforting to hear from you. You've done it multiple times of not just publishing books, publishing several articles, that even for someone as experienced as you still sometimes get stuck, or you still sometimes
Yeah.
run into some issues, and that
Definitely.
it's normal. Yeah. So we're here to talk about the book, and I thought it would be fun for us to start with why we wrote the book. I'm not the best at remembering, but I know that we've shared parts of this story when we've given book talks, but I'd love for you to like start us out with why we wrote the book and how we came to working on this project together.
Yeah. I think that for me, well, first I'll say I saw the work that you were doing, right? And how impactful your work was, and everything you had done over the years when I met you and when I got to know you after several months. And I got to see you went behind the scenes and looked at your actual podcast, all the transcripts and everything. And I just thought that doing a book would be a different way to provide that information to listeners, your audience, and all these folks out there who needed it. And so I thought it would be really great to be able to, put that information in a digestible format that would be a guide, that would be like what I'm thinking, like from A to Z, right? That they can go there and figure out, why grad school even something for me? How would I do that? What would I look at? What do I need to consider? So it kind of was a really, I think, an important tool that we both saw that was missing and not available. And I think you saw that, even you knew that from day one. And for us, when we did that literature review, right, looking to see who else had worked on this kind of topic, what else was out there, we found a few things that were similar, but definitely there was a big hole. And I'm always telling people, like, don't just do it because there's the big hole. You need to make another claim about why that hole needs to be filled. But certainly there's so many people, that we knew that this was going to reach. And so, or the potential to reach. And so those folks are the reasons why we did this, at least for me. I always had like this person in my mind of who I was writing for. And generally it was like a non-traditional student of color. And so I thought that they're the ones who really need that. They don't have access to institutional support. They don't perhaps even like one-on-one support. So here's another resource for them that they can access on their own time.
Right. Right. And then for me, when I think about why we wrote the book and how it got started, I think about myself way, way back when I was an undergrad, because I remember wishing that there was a book like this back when I was, I think it was a junior year at UCLA. And even though I had the privilege of being part of a grad school preparation program, and was part of the Mellon Mays undergraduate fellowship, we were part of the first cohort. And so a lot of it was getting built along the way. And I felt like there was so much about the process that I was figuring out on the spot. And that felt very frustrating to me. So I remember thinking, why is there no guide, resource, or even binder? Back then we had a lot of binders with handouts. And I remember making my own binder full of resources and thinking, there's got to be a way to share this with others. And that was just an idea that came up in my head when I was a college student. And then in grad school, I continued to feel that way of just that the struggles that come with navigating the hidden curriculum and learning about things a little bit too late and wishing that you had known those things earlier. And then again, just over and over again, it just kept hitting me, like someone just with a chancla hitting me in the back of the head, like, this is so obvious. Working for McNair at UC Santa Barbara, where we met, thinking I have access to all of these resources and I physically don't have the capacity to mentor all these students who reach out, especially the friends of the McNair scholars who didn't get in, who still needed that information. That's what started the podcast. That was the catalyst for the podcast. But you are the catalyst for the book actually becoming real, because I didn't take that seriously. That felt like a big lofty dream and unattainable. And if anything, that's where my imposter phenomenon kicks in, a feeling like, oh, my writing's not good enough. Who's actually going to read this? I'm not an academic. Can I really do this? So when you offered to support me in that process, it gave me that the validation, affirmation, and the support, guidance, femtorship that I needed to get through that stage of publishing, co-authoring my first book. So in any case, it's a big kind of thank you to you, because without you, I don't think this would have been possible. And even if it was, it wouldn't have come at this time. It would have taken me a little longer to get there.
Well, as I see our relationship and this book coming together was like two big pieces of one puzzle, sort of. You have and had all of these insights and knowledge and experience, and I came with a different set of skills, right? And I think that I didn't realize, even until recently, until McNair, really I'm thinking about McNair and how this program over, decades has helped to demystify and break apart the whole process that I thought was just something to get through quickly. Right? That was when I applied.
Mm-hmm.
It just was, how many do I apply to? I have no idea. It was such a complex and process. I just wanted to get to grad school, but I had no idea what I was even getting into. And so I think that you having all this knowledge and, again, insights and connections to people, it was just seemed like we needed to get that out there. And so, yeah, it happened to come at the right time. So I'm really excited about that.
So now that we talked about why we wrote the book and how we got started, it's been just over a year. We published the book in April 2024. We're recording this in May, and this episode should be out relatively soon, within a week or two after we record this. So it's been about a year. Let's talk a little bit more about what's come up in the last year, any impact we've noticed, speaking engagements, or anything else that came up because of the book.
I think a lot of things have come up because of the book. To me, what's been most impactful, I think, is meeting people who have engaged the book or who want to learn more about the book. And particularly when we've worked with our colleagues at these different campuses, that's been really great to see the students online. Many of our sessions have been primarily online, but we've also done some hybrid and also in person. So all of those have been terrific, working with the students. And I just see this as the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we could really, there's so much more to be done, but people sometimes don't have the resources or the time always to be able to invest more into this kind of work that we're doing, that you're doing so much, in terms of, because I think they realize this is important, but there's other things they're also considering. And so nevertheless, I think the people that we've reached, we've been so grateful in the kind of information we're able to provide to them. So that's been really fun, I think, in meeting people and then getting the messages through email, of course, like, oh, this book is terrific. The one thing that always comes across, of course, is this is the book I wish I had when I was, applying to school. And, thinking now about when I was in grad school, or even when I was considering it, I didn't think it was possible to have a book or resource that could encapsulate all those, aspects, the big ones and the nuances that you need to consider as a first gen. We didn't even have that language, of course, first gen, in the 90s or earlier. And so, we didn't know what we were getting into, but nevertheless, everyone so far we've met, I've had very positive things to say. I'm always looking for not the negative things, but what else could we talk about? And certainly there's definitely could be a second portion to the work, but I won't jump ahead. But yeah, I'd say all those things sort of come to mind. It's kind of a blur. We did so many interviews. Like, was it pretty tiring? I think I won't say exhausting, but it was fun. And we did a lot of interviews. You wrote up blurbs for, newsletters,
Yeah.
like that. So it was a great opportunity. Has been. It will be.
Right. We did. I was counting, it was like 24 interviews and speaking engagements combined. And I forgot, yeah, we did that blurb for the Council of Opportunities in Education for the COE. And I know that I've received, and you two have received, communication from folks who have told us that they included the book in their curriculum. So grad school preparation courses, McNair programs have included it. Mellon May programs have adopted it as well. There's even a McNair boot camp, a grad school boot camp that started using it. And so it's been really cool to see folks at Cal States, at UCs, and smaller universities, even universities on the East Coast, adopting the book, and also to develop and strengthen relationships that we previously had. So I'm thinking about some folks that we knew from McNair, from my time when I was working at McNair, who then invited us to lead a workshop to new people. I'm thinking about like UC Merced and working to support their non-traditional students too. So all that to me, like that's what comes up in terms of the impact, is just like the wide reach of it. And yeah, I'm trying to think about anything else that came up from the last year. There were so many podcast interviews too.
Yeah, and talking to the different folks, and also I think a lot of times when we're on, well, at least in some of the podcasts, when people were also in the same kind of work that this book is about, right? So at times it could feel like there might be a competitive edge or not, but through the process of our interactions with them, I felt like at the end it was such a mutual, like, we're in this together, we're working together as a community, because there can be a lot of competition, I think, in these other spaces like podcasting that, people like, that's my territory. But we were like, we want to learn from you. And, and they invited us because they want to learn from us. But I remember getting so much from I remember Emily Roberts, who did stuff on, she works on helping graduate students with finances. And she was very reserved. But then when she was sharing, I thought, oh my God, I learned so much from her. And I thought that was a really great interview that really stuck in my mind. And yeah, the relationships with these people, we haven't kept too much in contact with her, but I think of somebody like Christina Gessler from the Academic Life podcast on the New Books Network. And she, we did an interview with her, and then we did a follow-up. She wanted, went broad and more specific. And that was really great to sort of have that relationship with her. So, because she brings in a lot of really great guests.
Yeah, and even more recently, we did the podcast interview with Doctora Gina Ann Garcia, and that was really interesting on like building a graduate going culture. So thinking about the book, not just for four-year institutions, but even as early as two-year institutions, like early exposure to grad school preparation. So I found that to be really, really insightful. She asked some really good questions that I hadn't thought about before. We even did an Instagram Live. So it's just interesting how we've done podcast interviews, Instagram Live. We've done workshops, and they've been hybrid, virtual, in person. We've done book talks. So it's been a good mix of things. And we're still, hopefully we'll have some other opportunities coming up this year. I'm curious how the book has impacted our work. So how it's impacted any like personal or professional shifts in like how you're approaching the work that you do and your career. Same for me. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think for me, it's been very impactful. Like, I've always wanted to do work that was more public facing or, engage in larger publics and communities. And I think that this book is exactly what I wanted. And it's been so nice to be able to have that sort of, I don't know what the word is, credential, cred or rep, street rep or cred, to say that, I can speak to these communities about issues of education, right? Because I'm a historian, but I love, of course, I think you ask almost any college student or somebody like, are they interested in issues around education? Of course they are, right? Everybody wants to study education. And I think for me, this book really allowed me to become sort of a momentary, maybe a quasi-expert in this particular subject. And I was just thinking too, as I was preparing for this interview, like when we first did, one of the hybrid interviews we did, speaking sessions we did was for the UCLA McNair National Conference. in the summer of 24. I guess it was last year. And
Right.
I was so nervous. I don't know. It was a big ballroom, and we're trying to work on the tech. So you're coming in on Zoom, and I'm there, and I didn't want to look at the audience, right? Because I feel like everybody was staring at me. And then shift or fast forward, I want to say 6-7 months, where we did the hybrid one at the McNair Promising Practices Institute in New Orleans. And I was like Oprah. I was like walking around. I was going to say a different person, but the young people won't know who that is. Walking around with the microphone and asking people questions. And I just felt so comfortable at that point. So I just thought, wow, it does take the writing process to make you become an expert, of course, because you're doing research and you're writing about it, and then you're talking a lot about it. And then it just becomes such an important part. I think it's this subject is very near dear to my heart. It's all the work that I've been doing in a sort of service capacity and teaching capacity. And it's nice to bring it all together in a book and to sort of, I hate to say this, but kind of legitimize it within that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a lot of times that's how people say, oh, well, you wrote a book. That makes it this sort of legitimate kind of, I don't know, vehicle.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because in terms of professional development, in terms of career development, people do treat you differently when you are an author. And I've noticed that distinction in the last year of previously, like this is a draw in of folks know, oh, you're the co-author, or oh, you've published, or like there is. And even though I also feel like I'm sighing right now, I feel a bit uncomfortable with acknowledging that of the value of doing work that's perceived as legitimate so that you can enter the right spaces. For me, it's about that. It's about access to the spaces to be able to be there for the people that need us. And that's the feedback that we've received from our workshops and our book talks, is that students feel seen, they feel heard, they feel inspired, they walk away with actionable things that they can do. And so that's why, for me, that was the strategy behind, oh, let me publish with an academic press. I don't have to, or I didn't have to. I'm not in academia per se, but I knew that there was that value of the quote unquote legitimacy of publishing in a way where it would be peer reviewed and where academic institutions would also value that, and it would allow me to enter those spaces where I wanted to have access to the people I want to work with. So yeah, there's that. That is important. And it's just a reminder to folks who are thinking about whether or not they want to publish a book themselves of what can come after that.
Yeah, and it puts you kind of in a small group of, a much smaller group of people that you're sort of in conversation with. Not that that's, I don't know, make that sound exclusionary or but it does give you a different kind of a profile. And I think access point, what's the goal here is to help as many students as we can. And if we can reach larger audiences, and let's do that.
And one of the things too, in terms of me and my work, in publishing the work, I've realized even more so just how needed this work is, because there's been more visibility attached to it. I think I in my day-to-day, I forget how needed this work is. And so now that I'm working, I've been supporting folks in the graduate admissions process since 2010. And more recently, I've been on the other side of things, supporting graduate students with the dissertation writing and completion process. And that's what's coming up for me, is like, if there is this guide and resource for students applying, there might be a need for a guide or a resource for those navigating graduate school. And there are. I'm thinking about the Latinx Guide to Graduate School as a really, really solid guide to support Latinx students. But in this case, like with the tangible strategies, that hands-on support, there is that need. So I'm thinking to myself, even like in learning from this book, like what could come next. So yeah, for me, it's been just like a really cool reflective process of like, wow, this work is what we have needed and continues to be needed. And even more so now with what we're seeing of the potential of a lot of different federally funded programs getting eliminated, and the very real fear that TRIO will also get impacted in that way. It's even more of a reason to do this work. It's needed. It's needed more than ever. And I'll add a link to the TRIO. What was it? The
website?
Yeah. Yeah, so that folks can sign the petition
Oh, okay.
because, yeah, I was just thinking about the petition right now. I was just thinking about how, like, there's so many of us that are being impacted in a negative way by our current administration. And a book like this is the type of book that we need because it shows that this work is needed. Yeah.
And for folks who don't know, TRIO is the umbrella organization under which McNair operates. And also it's part of Upward Bound, the social services, with SSS, which is like
Student support services.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's a few other, right, that are there too, that are supported by TRIO. So, and that predates the Department of Education. It was created, and McNair specifically created through a congressional action legislation. And so we're technically, legally safe, but, you know, that's not really the way things operate right now in Capitol Hill.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just thinking about that. Like it's all interconnected. That the reason why we're noticing the impact is because it's needed now more than ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought we could also talk about some of the FAQs that have come up, you know, during our workshops, during our book talks. We've received some overlapping questions. And the first that comes to mind is folks want to know like about the collaborative writing process. So first off, like what is it even like to write a book? And second, what is it like to write a book collaboratively? Because not everybody does that.
Yeah.
Especially in the humanities and social sciences. I know it's more common in STEM to be a co-author, but in our case, this is unusual. So yeah, what are your thoughts on the writing process and or how we collaborated? I'm taking a quick pause to tell you about one of my favorite time-saving tools, Descript. I use it to transcribe interviews, generate podcast show notes, create short social media clips, and record easy-to-share tutorials for my clients. It's also incredibly useful for academics. You can create accessible course materials with captions and transcripts, share explainer videos with your students, and make all of your material searchable and easier to organize. If you're looking for a more efficient way to work, check out my affiliate link in the show notes.
You know, in my career as a historian, I haven't had too many opportunities or done it too often, but the few times that I've done it have been pretty positive for the most part. And I think that if done well, it's great. It's so generative. And one of the things that I discovered recently, I've been working on these teaching videos on how to write a journal article in the humanities. And one of the points that I came across in doing my research is that people in STEM are much more productive because they work in teams. Whereas we are in the humanities told at some point that, you know, this is a test of the self. This is about the individual. And yeah, I agree with that this is right. It's to show what does the individual have, or what do they bring, and what are their ideas. But I think that when we're in isolation, because, you know, academia and even writing, I don't care what field you're in, it can be, people say you're writing in community, well, but you're alone writing there. But it's nice when you find somebody who you can vibe with, that you have a good rapport with at writing. And that takes some work, right? Getting to know that. So I'm not saying you're just going from point A to point B and let's do this. I would not recommend just sort of with your best bud, your BFF, say, let's do this. You need to really figure out each other's style. But I felt like with working with you, it was just like, I felt responsible. Like, there's Yvette, right? I have to write because she's going to be expecting. And that really gave me some impetus, and that's what really kept me going versus like, right, like, open the computer. So, and this is a slightly different book, I think, than my other kind of academic writing. But I felt like it was really great. And I think that because, again, we brought different skills, different strengths, we were each adding, it's not that we were repeating ourselves, or I thought I was, you know, writing in an area that was your expertise. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this part. Yvette will do that part. And so forth. So I think that it just worked really well. I think we're very fortunate, because I've been in other situations where I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and then the communication breaks down, and then it's a black hole, and then it's 6 months, 12 months, and then, you know, it's not a good place to be. So I think that doing a lot of thinking ahead and planning and mapping out some stuff. But we did some of that, but I think we were just fortunate that still things came together. Because you can't prepare, you can't think ahead of everything, right? I don't think.
Right.
And
I do agree. No. Yeah. Like what I'm hearing you say is that one of the things that worked well for us is that we both have different strengths and we played to our strengths. Another thing I didn't hear you say, but I think that was involved in why this was, for me at least, and from my personal experience, such a smooth process, was because we trust each other.
Oh, yeah.
And because I trust you and I trust your judgment, I trust your opinion, I trust your knowledge, even if we give each other feedback and constructive criticism, sometimes it can be hard to accept feedback, but I know that it comes from a good place. And that's why, I mean, recently I shared with you a very, very early outline of potentially what could be my next book. And I felt so raw, just like sharing it with you, so vulnerable sharing it with you. But I thought it's because I trust her. I trust her judgment. And then the feedback you gave me was so good. In some ways I was like, wait, why did I think of that? But I'm like, this is why you need a second pair of eyes.
Right.
And this is why these are the benefits of the collaborative writing process. And I'm glad that you mentioned this, how it's more common in STEM, because it's just a reminder that it doesn't have to be the case. Even if you're writing your own sole authored book, or even if you're writing your own sole authored article, you don't have to do it alone. You can still have someone else giving you feedback, someone else who you trust. And I'm trying to think about anything else.
Sorry. When you were saying trust, that's something that when I was taking notes on what we're going to talk about today, it came up quite a bit. But the other one related to that is respect, right? So I trust you. I totally trust and also highly respect you and your ideas. So I felt that, again, it was sort of, I don't want to say obligation, a duty, responsibility, being accountable. All these things were wrapped up in my head, like that this was a really important project to do. And that because I respected so much your work and because I wanted to. And also, I think at some point I was also, really felt the weight of the fact that you let me sort of enter that space, like to read the podcast and go through them. Like you shared that, all of that, that's yours. That's your intellectual property, or however you want to talk. We can talk about intellectual property. So you open that up, you open the vault, essentially, right? You open this vault, your archive. And I went in there and you let me sort of manipulate or like go through it and pull it. And that's really big to do that, So again, I guess that's trust, right? You feeling like I'm not going to take these things and run with them and do God knows what. And so that's also pretty, I think all those points sort of fed into this work.
Yeah. I learned so much from that experience of even how do you turn something that's in a different medium or modality into what later became the book. That is like, I'm taking that as like a learning lesson, even going into future writing of like, there's so much to learn from one another when you work with other people. And about the writing process, like it doesn't have to be done in this very particular way. Some folks get caught up with like, I have to write a certain way. And it doesn't have to start that way. It could start with a voice memo. It could start with notes. It could start with journaling. It's whatever gets you to then ultimately rework it and turn it into the writing that gets published. And and I'm thinking about motivation and timelines and how, because we weren't starting from scratch, because our relationship also, we weren't building it from scratch, because we both knew the topic so well, and because we just so happened to get lucky with the editors that we worked with. Somehow sounds too good to be true, but for me, it was an overwhelmingly positive experience. And I didn't expect that. I was signing up thinking, okay, like almost like putting up my my armor. It's like, oh, here we go. I'm going to publish something. It's going to be hard. And it wasn't. That was the biggest surprise, I think, in this whole process.
I was 23, right? We really jammed through that. I mean, we're just like the summer of 23, I think it was, right?
We wrote it in 6 months.
Yeah.
That was the timeline.
It was
like in terms of
passing the baton
draft.
back and forth, It was kind of like that. I mean, we all independently.
También, we weren't even rushing.
I know. We independently worked on different parts, but then at times it was like, can you pick this up because I have this or so, and it just kind of worked. So
I wanted to mention that too, because there was a lot of grace and compassion that we offered to each other. And I always feel self-conscious when things come up, like flare-ups or stuff with my health and chronic illness. And you just were there. You understood, like that is really important too, of like communicating your needs, communicating your boundaries, and then offering each other grace. So extending each other grace, vice versa. I know that if anything ever comes up with you, and if we're working on something together, like I will pick up the slack because you always do that for me too. So I want to acknowledge that, because I feel like it's one thing to say, I wrote a book in 6 months and to brag about it, but then you're hustling and working yourself to death.
Yeah.
We didn't do that. Yeah.
Right. And I'm thinking now as you're speaking, whether it was useful for us to be at different points in our careers, right? Because I don't have young children. My children are in college. You have baby. I mean, you have a baby. Your child, your youngest child was pretty young, and your son, your homeschool. I mean, whew, God, I didn't have all that, right? I could just literally sit in front of the computer. We know my spouse and the dog. I just tell them, hang on, and they're very understanding. My husband more than the dog, but it was.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, I had to get her out of the room because she was just going to be. Anyways, so yeah, I think that, I don't know. I just think maybe if we would have been at the same point, it would have been harder, or I don't know. Just thinking
that. The process has felt very equitable. Certainly not equal, but equitable. And to me, that's really important. And because we're at different stages, and because our careers are also different, and the meaning and the value of the book is different for both of us.
Totally. Yeah.
We did have to have hard conversations, and we continue to have hard conversations. But at the end of the day, we've arrived at like compromises that to us felt mutually beneficial and equitable. And I respect you so much because of that. Because a lot of folks just like insist on what is quote unquote equal, and then it doesn't end up being equitable. And so, yeah, I just want to shout you out, because I really do. You're not just a femtor. You're a sponsor. You're just like, anybody who works with you is so lucky.
People did that for me.
Have access.
It's all
but
about
you know
that
what? I work with so many people who don't have mentors, advisors, committee members, supervisors, you name it, because you were once my supervisor, who do this. And I personally did not have that kind of experience. And that's why we're still in touch, because there's so much value in our relationship, like both like at the professional and the personal level. And so, yeah, this episode is not about like, I do want to give you your flowers. And I know it's not about that, but I can't not mention it, because it's a big part of like what I believe is the success of the book is also the success of our relationship.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people too were like, who is Yvette, or if they know me, but they don't know you, and then they see you, it's like, oh, she must be pretty special. I think, and I think, yes, she is people need to know you. And yeah, definitely. I think that's part of it. I think we both have our own, I see your values through your work with all your clients and the people that you really, really care about. And so for me, I want to lift you up, and that's why I'm here. At the end of the day, it's about the other person, even decisions that we did, like, people might ask, like, how did you decide on who came first name on the book or the cover?
Right.
Or how do you handle, all the other aspects of it? So yeah, it's a matter, I'm thinking it through, and what it is what is the purpose, but the benefit, how are we going to, and this partly because it's part of my values and how I tried to move in this world, but again, I'm just thinking about all the people who've done this for me in the past.
Right.
Now's my turn.
Yeah, I love that. And I see that too. Like in any way that I can uplift, amplify, mentor, sponsor others, I do, because it just makes such a big difference. And, if anything, we need it. I keep saying this, and I know I sound like a broken record, but we need it now more than ever. We need to rely on these relationships.
Because we can't rely on the
make it
institutions
through
anymore. No, at all.
Right. So looking ahead, speaking of getting through this administration and beyond, looking ahead, what's coming next? In light of what we've learned from a year of this book being out in the world, is there anything you're working on next? Anything I'm working on next? Any ideas, hopes, dreams for what comes next, and also for the future of the book, because it's not like 1 year we're done. It's we don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like every time you put a book out into the world, it's an ofrenda, and you never know what will happen with it.
So that's true.
And so,
Well, one thing we
yeah, I'm
didn't mention
curious what's coming up.
is, and I think this is kind of partly what inspired. So just to go back to the point about this work being very public facing and very engaged in the community, because a lot of our academic work, honestly, doesn't really go beyond the four walls of the institution. And so I think this book has sort of made that more clear, like how important that is. And so things that I've been thinking about for a while is maybe doing a graphic novel related to this kind of the academic work. So the message, the point about that I work on right now, I thought, like, wouldn't it be cool to communicate that through a graphic novel that could be a target at the high school, like a senior high school level or, undergrad level, that could be assigned, and more people would pick that up. Again, because our academic books get read by such a small group, and even unless you have to really hustle hard to get your message out there. But I was thinking one thing we mentioned today is, like, our book is sold about probably 2,000 or more than 2,000 copies. It's probably more than
Definitely more than 2,000. Yeah.
More. It's probably more than I'm easily more than all my other books together. So that's pretty cool. And then it's been downloaded. I don't know how many times. It's available to the library. So getting it into hands of others, I think that's why we're here. We're not here to keep our books on a dusty shelf. So I think for me, this has inspired me to think about how I could do that. I'm also thinking about doing sort of not an academic book. I want to write it in a way that's more accessible, but still the idea of a graphic novel, something different. It's a different genre. And that's something that I keep thinking about. Yeah. And it kind of comes and goes, but that's, yeah.
Wow. I'm not sure if you had told me that you were thinking of working on a graphic novel. That sounds so cool. Do you have do you have someone to work on the art for that, or is that something you would do?
I'm not an artist. I mean, I love art, and I was a kid. I was like, who doesn't? My partner, my spouse, he sort of volunteered, but I know it's hard to work with your partners. I just told him, oh, okay. And then my oldest child is getting a degree in art, digital media. So potentially, we're not. There's always there's a collective of graphic artists of color, or even have a website, this where you can tap into them. But it is very expensive because it's a lot of labor.
Yes.
But there's also a press. One of the presses has a whole series on them, so I could potentially approach. I haven't looked into it quite yet, but I know I've seen them. I've read some of them. One book called The Best We Could Do. I love that. It's about the
Oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah, that's so impactful. My oldest child read Earl Lewis's book like 3 times. Like this is the 3rd time I'm looking at this graphic novel on civil rights. So yeah, I mean, they're just, when done well, not all of them do well. So it's just another vehicle.
Yeah, I have definitely enjoyed reading graphic novels. They just felt more accessible, and I think that's exciting. Yeah. I mean, for me, when I think about what comes next, I do envision writing another guide type book. I haven't decided if it's going to be strictly for a graduate student audience or if it's going to be for graduate students and professionals. But I know there's still very much a need for demystifying the graduate school and career development process. And that's kind of where my work is going now. Even though I still do a lot of grad admissions work, there's so much even beyond that. It's similar to like this whole pipeline thing of, okay, you get support from high school to get to college. Now what? And then maybe you get into one of these preparation programs in college, you receive guidance, and then you get to grad school, and then now what? And it would be the next step of supporting individuals in their own career and life journey. So that's what comes up for me, is just like a guide for sustainable success, of defining your own version of sustainable success and how to get there. But we'll see. We'll see how long it'll take me to do the research and the writing process, and eventually work up the courage to either publish it myself or to send it out and see if a publisher will be interested.
Yeah, you do so much of it already, and whenever you give these presentations, students are just, love it. And I mean, from someone who's been around for many decades, it's always useful to remind, because we just get, sometimes things change, like, just new tools, AI, for instance. Are we going to navigate that? How is that going to? So we're always learning new things, and it's hard to keep up. I mean, at my age, Only because when you grow up with things like AI, then it's normal because you know it every day. But if it's something completely new, you have to take time away from what you're already doing to learn a new tool. And often we resist it, but it's good to, and so that's why the kind of work that you do is so useful for everyone at all stages.
Yeah, and I would want it to be relatively accessible to folks of all ages, stages, with shared values as this like common denominator. Yeah. So, definitely like an anti-burnout guide. Right? We don't want folks doing work and then harming themselves in the process. So those are my thoughts. It's just, it's right now, it's more of a dream than a goal. But eventually, I think
I'll make you get there. Well,
you're going to nudge me. I know. You're going to keep me accountable. Yeah. Let's nudge each other. I'll remind you about the graphic novel. You remind me about this one.
I just talk about it like really lofty because I think we both know, making the decision to do something or not is a big decision. So you need to be prepared for it. Because
we both take it very seriously.
Yeah. I don't want to go into something and then let it sort of crumble apart. That wouldn't feel good.
And maybe that's another thing, just going back to how we made this work. I do think that we both are the type of people that, like, once we make a decision, we commit to it, and not everybody's like that. So, yeah, it's been so amazing working with you. Now, as we get close to wrapping up, because we're getting close to our time today, I'm curious if there's any closing reflections you want to leave us with, either like pleasant surprises, what's brought you joy in this process or in the last year related to the book, or any shout outs, anything we want to share with our listeners today.
I guess I would like to shout out everybody who's, involved in the book, all the people who offered their sample statements, all these students now who are probably finishing up their PhD programs who've come before us. Also, all the people who throughout my career have been involved, whether they know it or not, in this process. And it's kind of fun once in a while. I don't do it very often. I like to read the book and sometimes like who wrote this? Like, I don't know. It's just, it is our voice, but then it's sort of, because it's a different thing. It's out there. It becomes something else. And yeah, it's just still full of pride in having this work out there. And I'm looking to engage it more in the recent future. So yeah, excited to do more work with it.
Right. I've been using it as a resource and having it accompany like the work that I do, and I work one-on-one. So when I've had programs hire me to work one-on-one with their students, I will make sure that they have access to the book, and then I will assign certain chapters, or I'll have them take a look at some sample essays. And so it's actually been a really great add-on for the curriculum and for the teaching and the guidance that I offer in my consulting sessions with students. And yeah, in terms of just like pride and joy, it's been just really cool to hear from people, both folks who were involved in the book, where, like you said, the folks that submitted their sample essays or who were quoted in the book, and now seeing that they're finishing their programs is just such a gratifying feeling. And then also to hear on the other side of things, folks who are new to us and the book and who just are like, oh, I found your book at my local library. I found your book. Someone said they found it at a Barnes & Noble. I'm like, we're at a Barnes & Noble.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Wow, very cool.
Yeah, and randomly messaged me just to thank me. Like, they just opened the book and then like started reading the intro and got hooked. And I'm like, wow, that's so amazing to hear stories like that of folks who just suddenly find the book out of nowhere and really feel seen by our story, by especially the introduction where people have said it feels like a plática. And that's what we were aiming for, of just really telling a little bit about our backstories so that folks can understand where we come from and why we wrote the book. So it's been a really beautiful experience, gratifying year. Just, oh my goodness. I don't know how we made it work. We just talked about how we made it work, but just like looking back, I'm like, wow, we did a lot.
Yeah. And we're very fortunate, I think. I mean, I don't always believe in luck, I think that, I do. It's easier to say than what it really is. And I think below the sort of the idea of just luck, it's really relationships and opportunities that are created. Because sometimes, it's just like, No, there was real reasons. We're on privileged spaces in different ways. And I think that that's what has allowed us. I mean, the fact that I had a relationship with my colleague who put us in contact with UC Press. Yeah, we could have gone another way, another press eventually. But that relationship, I had published a book with them before, and I knew all these things, right? And you have all these experiences, working with all these clients, and having that really solid, that was really useful as well, of course. Central to how this project came together.
Yeah. So it's a reminder that the book publishing process is also about relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not just about the writing. And so much happens after the writing that sometimes it feels like the writing is only a fraction of the process.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Miros, for joining us for this lovely conversation, for allowing us to reflect on this experience, for being my friend, my femtor, my sponsor, co-author, all the things, so many titles, so many roles. You have so many hats that you wear, and just know that you're appreciated.
Thank you. And thank you so much for listening and for agreeing to work with me and all of these things. It's just been, sometimes when I'm going along, I'm like, I need a dose of Yvette. I need to contact her, for her to listen, to give me feedback and really reflect back on. And so you're so good at that. And yeah, I feel so fortunate to be able to, even though we're generations apart, to be able to connect with you. That's really cool.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, here are 3 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way is to get your copy of my free resource kit linked in my show notes. This kit includes tools, worksheets, and podcast playlists on all things grad school, productivity, and personal development. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle @Grad School Femtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.